So the next chapter is required documentation and record keeping. So this chapter describes the mapping, documentation, and record keeping for the maintenance inspection of BMPs on private property. This is essential for your program because A, it just helps keep you organized. B, it is required in both permits. So like I mentioned, mapping those connections from private properties to the MS4 is required in both permits by August of this year. There are the 3 acceptable electronic formats. So we have GIS, CAD, and then a similar software that can store points, lines, polygons, and associated attributes. So I'm also curious, back to Slido, what does your jurisdiction use to map the MS4? Okay, this does confirm what we found. We found that the most popular method that permittees were using is GIS. Looking at these 2 methods, we did find that GIS is the most popular. So CAD, traditionally, as we've used, is generally for design and for documenting design. A lot of the reason that we found GIS is more common is because when you're working with CAD, you're in a Cartesian coordinate system that is giving you information on an X, Y, and Z axis, generally tying to an arbitrary origin, your 0, 0, 0. Yes, you can connect that with a survey, but in general, CAD is used for design intent. You're focusing on the accuracy of the scale and the shape of whatever you are drawing. We have an example up here. If you are mapping, you would be looking at plan view, but we're showing profile view of these catch basins and pipes, which gives the actual data about each feature and is showing it with a scale. That is usually the intent of what we see with CAD. So once a project is complete, you're developing record drawings that is there to document any changes from the original design that happened during construction. And often the workflow that we have seen with different permittees is once you have these record drawings, they are then brought into GIS. So GIS is more of a database with spatial features, and the focus of that is more on the geographic location than it is design intent. So as you can see here, when you're looking at these different features, you have different utilities here, but the symbols all pretty much look the same. So it's more represented often as like a point versus in CAD, you have something that has dimensions that more accurately represents the feature that you're talking about, whether that's a pipe, a catch basin, or a BMP. There are other benefits also to using GIS. You can combine this with other spatial data. So whether that is land cover, soil type, slopes, you can then use that for some stormwater analysis. So we have reported that for these mapping features, permittees have also used that because they can combine it with more spatial data. So part of this documentation that we mentioned is developing this BMP inventory. Some of the information that is helpful to pull when you're developing this inventory is shown on the screen. So obviously you're going to need BMP type in all of its details, including its components. It's also helpful to have a unique identifier, so then you can tie this BMP to other data or other databases. Contributing area is helpful if you have that information, whether it's coming from a stormwater report that's been submitted. If you have the opportunity to add that, it can be helpful again with mapping. BMP owner contact information, year installed, and then if there's any maintenance schedules or inspections. If you as the permittee are assuming the maintenance of these BMPs, collecting some of the information below the green line is also helpful because these can help you, especially if you're looking at lifespan, anticipated date of replacement, and costs. That's going to help you with cost projections with some of these maintenance and then replacement of these elements further down the road. First, I want to say it is required by ecology to track your inspections. They do not dictate the information you need to collect. So figuring out what that checklist looks like is up to you, especially if you were the one doing the inspections. So some of the information that is helpful to develop these are the inspector name, date, and time, weather conditions, again, having that unique BMP identifier that you can then connect back for different databases. And then you're going to have contact information, location type, and that is all going to be regardless of what your BMP type is. Then you're going to have specific information you're collecting about each BMP type. A great place to start for that data is in both of the Eastern Washington and Western Washington manuals. In the appendices, they have some guidelines on the information you should be collecting when inspecting. There are a couple examples up here. So just inspecting each of the BMP components, documenting if there's any visible flow or discharges, and then if there's any non-compliances or if maintenance is needed, making sure that you are documenting those. And then you may decide if you want to include any photos or signatures, especially if you have a third party or if you want the property owner to acknowledge that this inspection or maintenance took place. Maintenance checklist. Again, if the permittee is assuming the maintenance, you're going to have some similar type of documentation. A lot of this is going to be similar to the inspection checklist. So just looking up here, again, the name of the person doing the maintenance, that unique BMP identifier, and then the BMP data. And then what I want to highlight, if you are tracking maintenance, especially for budget purposes, including the start date and end date and time can be very helpful. Like Taylor said, if you're looking to build out what this program is going to cost, this is really helpful to start doing so that you can better estimate how long it's taking you to actually do these inspections. Again, both before and after photos, and then signatures if you decide to collect those. Want to highlight in the manual, we have again provided examples of inspection and maintenance checklists. So if you're needing to develop those, hopefully we've given you a place that you could start.
Apologies, everyone. Unfortunately, the camera at Unicon stopped working, so the remaining chapters were re-recorded. So I left off in chapter 4, mentioning that example inspection checklists are provided in Appendix 2B. So now that we've talked about what information do we need to track, let's talk about how we do this. So both the Eastern Washington permit and Western Washington permit require to track activities, but Ecology does not specify a particular method. So historically, this has been conducted using hard copy checklists, logs, and manual data entry. However, many permittees have transitioned to using an asset management software to help automate and streamline this process. So both options are totally fine. It just depends on what is better suited for your jurisdiction. So using hard copy documentation might make sense if you have a small MS4 system, or if your department just doesn't have the funds to purchase these asset management software platforms, which can be pretty expensive. I mentioned earlier, before you do your inspections, you need to make sure you're identifying all of your BMPs, and then you need to develop a schedule for inspecting these BMPs. So with hard documentation, the common practice that I've discovered with talking to multiple permittees is often dividing your jurisdiction into sections. So for example, if you just divide your jurisdiction into 4 quadrants, you would inspect in the same order, 1, 2, 3, 4 for every inspection cycle. So this also helps you determine the number of inspections that are required either each week or month or your inspection season to meet permit requirements. And then you can use a calendar or another scheduling program to keep all of this information organized. And hopefully you have a system that can set up reminders to help you remember when you need to go out and inspect each BMP. So documenting using hard copy documentation involves recording results on paper. So as I mentioned in chapter 2, checklists are often developed for inspections using maintenance requirements for each BMP. So there are going to be some sites that have different BMPs or multiple BMPs, and they may require separate checklists. So the inspector needs to be prepared with those checklists before going on site. So losing information is also a risk when using hard copy documentation. So 2 recommendations are manually entering the inspection and maintenance details into some type of database or like an Excel spreadsheet as soon as you can after the inspection, and then also scanning and uploading those paper documents so that you have a backup. Tracking all of your inspections and maintenance activities with hard copy documentation. This is done by storing these in some type of database. So this may even include just a file on your computer or server for each BMP. So you're going to want to obviously include the inspection results and required maintenance activities, but other helpful documents to keep with each BMP are photos and maps, any development plans, any maintenance agreements or O&M manuals. And then it's also really important to track all of the correspondence that you have with the BMP owner or responsible party. And then it's recommended that you develop some type of master file, and this could be, again, like an Excel spreadsheet to track the total number of inspections and follow-up actions. So asset management software, let's just start with a basic definition from the EPA. So asset management is the practice of managing infrastructure capital assets to minimize the total cost of owning and operating them while delivering the service level customers desire. So in terms of stormwater, an asset is a component of the system with an independent physical and functional identity. So this is going to be a manhole, a catch basin, a pipe, or different types of BMPs. So asset management software can help permittees with a variety of things. This can be managing the age and condition of the jurisdiction's assets, which then helps plan for future capital improvement projects. And then it can also help with documenting and tracking activities, which is what we're talking about today with BMP maintenance and inspection. So first, taking a bigger look at asset management software. So historically, asset management software was used for big businesses, generally commercial, that have a lot of inventory. They're tracking customer service complaints and actions, needing work orders. A lot of that software that we are seeing is not necessarily something that was developed for stormwater or even, public works and utilities for that matter. Over the last several years, we are seeing specific software that is being developed for these specific uses. But if you're just looking at asset software in general, some of the typical features you're going to see are, like I mentioned, that database of system assets, complaint processing, work order processing, and then mapping capabilities, report generating, and then a lot of financial reporting. And then also, like I said, just tracking those customer service systems, whether that's requests or complaints. And then it can be linked with other things like GIS and CAD and multi-user capabilities. So those are some just very a broad list of typical features, not all of which would be used for stormwater, especially inspections and maintenance of BMPs and private property. So when you're looking for an asset management software program, the features you want to make sure you are targeting for stormwater are the following. So an intuitive user interface. Unfortunately, with all of the asset management software platforms that I have worked with, they have all required quite a steep learning curve, but finding something that is has the most intuitive user interface as possible for you and your team is really important. With the permittees that I have worked with, either purchasing or developing this software, really, it's been said that at the end of the day, if this isn't going to be easy to use, it's not going to be used. So try to find something, whether it's through demonstrations or just getting a little bit of hands-on experience in that software to figure out if it's something that's going to work for you. So it's also important that it integrates with other applications for your jurisdiction. So GIS, CAD, Excel, so you can incorporate these other programs. Configurability. Like I mentioned, even if the software is designed for public works or utilities or even stormwater specifically, there's going to still be some need to configure it to your jurisdiction's needs. Your needs are not necessarily going to match your neighboring jurisdiction's needs. So making sure you have that ability to configure the software is important. Communicate with mobile application. This is probably one of the most important, especially with what we're talking about today, inspecting and maintaining B&Ps on private property. And that is because this is one way asset management software platforms really help streamline these inspections, is being able to take this software out into the field on some type of mobile device like a tablet and do these inspections and upload them in real time. And you're not going to be able to do that if there's not some type of mobile application. And then lastly, inclusion of operational modules that are beneficial for stormwater. So looking at those, your data collection ability, asset inventory, and mapping module, those are all going to help you develop that B&P inventory that we mentioned earlier. Your inspection module, like we said, having those checklists that are embedded into the system that you can use in real time. Service request and work order modules. These are features that are not often used for inspecting private B&Ps unless the permittee does assume maintenance. But often these features are used for maintaining public stormwater facilities that are owned and operated by the permittee. So in this situation, if you're out inspecting something and it does need maintenance right then and there, you could develop a work order and send it off to the person who's in charge of that. And then your tracking and reporting, that just helps streamline the process when you're having to gather all the information that you need to submit your annual report. So Appendix 4A in the guidance manual, this provides an asset management demonstration checklist. So one way to select an asset management software platform is to see demonstration. So often these companies will schedule a meeting with you and walk through their software with you and just kind of get you a feel for what it can do and what it looks like. And so we have actually developed a checklist that you can use to make comments and it's just hopefully in the end be able to use it to compare the different software to better help you make a selection that fits your needs. So now we've talked a little bit about asset management. We'll talk about the options for procuring it, and then also how to use it for inspecting and maintaining these B&Ps on private property. So there are two common ways to procure this type of software. One is just buying an off-the-shelf program. So these are going to be those big name programs like CityWorks or Cartograph, and they can be very expensive, but this is because they often include a lot of features. So if your jurisdiction has a large or complex MS4 system, or if your jurisdiction uses this software for multiple departments, then this can be a really beneficial option for your jurisdiction. But what you want to try to prevent is purchasing the software or paying a really expensive annual fee, and then a lot of these features just go unused. So if that's the situation that you find yourself in, or if these high price software platforms aren't in your budget, then another option is to kind of create your own customized system. So this is basically using either in-house databases or different applications that can connect relevant data to each other. So a great example of this is using different Esri apps. So for example, you might use Collector for your B&B inventory, in GIS for your mapping. You may use Survey 123 to develop your checklists, and then you may connect Crystal Reporting for your reporting. Just building a suite of these apps that can connect to each other is another way that you can do this. So it often can be less expensive, but one thing to note is that the development time can be pretty extensive. This is something that you could develop in-house if you do have the staff that has the experience, or you can hire an outside consultant to develop this for you. And then at the end, this just may result in a better product that's suited for you, especially if you're only wanting to use something specifically for stormwater. So to develop your BMP inventory using the asset management software, a lot of this can be done within the software, or the software can actually connect to an inventory you've already developed, for example, in GIS. And then what's also really helpful, a lot of these asset management softwares, if both GIS and the software can talk to each other, then you can update BMP data in real time when out in the field in the asset management software. And then that will push those edits through to GIS. So it's not a feature that every software includes, but quite a few of them do. So scheduling your inspections through the asset management software, this is something that it can be automated. So when you are out and doing an inspection and you close that inspection, a lot of asset management software can immediately schedule the next inspection in whatever time interval you set. So whether that's annually or every 6 months, you can set that up, and then the software will alert you when the BMP needs to be inspected again. So documenting inspection and maintenance activities using asset management software. Um, in the software, often there is data that is tied to each mapped BMP asset. So this will include just those general BMP features. So, like the size, or like what it is, when it was installed, all of that type of information. But it can also house information like the contact of the responsible party or the owner, or the date of the last inspection, or you can even tie, PDFs to this or other information that includes the inspection results or maintenance activities. So when you're out in the field, the checklist process may be similar to using the hard copy documentation. You still have these types of checklists, but as I mentioned, it's now embedded in the software and you can do it in real time. And then, like I said, if the permittee is responsible for maintenance, then you can create a work order and notify the responsible party. Lastly, tracking and asset management software is something that is also automated. So asset management software programs generally use some type of configurable dashboard. And so this can track different elements and activities over a specified time period in real time. So for example, this can let you know how many BMPs out of the total BMPs in your jurisdiction have been inspected, the percent of BMPs that have required maintenance. Often you can configure that to look like what you want so that it is just reporting that data in real time. So there is an example case study for the city of Wenatchee and the asset management software program that they use, and another jurisdiction in Idaho. So there's an example of those at the end of chapter 4. And lastly, during our workshop, we did a poll. So we asked, if your jurisdiction uses an asset management program, which program does your jurisdiction use? So of the 18 respondents, some of these answers were CityWorks, GIS, Survey 123, Excel. That's example of what I was talking about pulling those apps together to create a program for yourself. We have Cartograph, GIS, SmartGov, and then again, Esri, Survey 123, and Elements XS.